Difficult to talk about the terminology, but I see it sort of with three pillars. The crux of the security arrangements and the reassurance will of course be brought by Ukrainian troops. Then the key engagement comes from European troops. And then there has to be some kind of an agreement that, if things turn out really bad, America will be engaged. And of course, it's not so much about using American troops, but using American material, using American reconnaissance, using American intelligence, etc.
That, ladies and gentlemen, was the president of Finland saying the quiet part out loud. Basically, what the plan is right now is that Europe, more specifically UK and France, other places as well, they're going to send troops to Ukraine to assess the situation, to help out Ukraine. But God forbid something happen to any of these troops as they're actively in an active war zone. If something happens to them, then of course they're going to have to retaliate. And if things get bad, America has to step in. Oh boy, if things get bad, America needs to step in. What could go wrong? We have multiple countries sending soldiers to an active war zone that are supposedly not actively participating in the fighting. But if something happens, oh boy, what do you think? What do you think is going to happen? Obviously, something bad is going to happen. Either it's naturally going to happen because this is war, ladies and gentlemen, just in case people forgot, or we'll see some sort of false flag, something to drag America into this conflict. And the president of Finland was literally just golfing with Trump. So they're doing whatever they can to try to sway Trump, to try to win Trump over for more support in going into full war with Russia. But Trump has been adamant about saying that he wants to end this conflict. But that's what people don't understand. Trump himself does not have the full power to end this conflict. Sure, he's actively trying to do so, which is not something that Biden did. Biden never tried to end this war. In fact, there were multiple deals on the table in the past, and Biden and NATO refused those deals, or they even told Ukraine to refuse those deals. So Trump is trying to bring an end to this war, but Trump can't do that by himself. And as we pull back our support for Ukraine, the rest of NATO is starting to pour even more money in, right? For a while, they were depending on the U.S. Just keep sending billions and hundreds of billions of dollars every month. Now that we're dialing back, they're amping it up. They're amping up how much money they're sending to Ukraine. And here's the real kicker. Here's the real slap in the face. Zelensky has stated that all of this money that's coming from the EU, most of this money that's coming from the rest of NATO, he's basically said that he has no problem viewing that as a loan and paying some of that money back. But when it comes to the money that the U.S. has been sending him, he's actively stated he does not view that as a loan, and he does not plan on paying that money back. So all of the money we've been sending him, regardless if we were expecting that money back or not, he's actively said, I do not view it as a loan. You ain't getting that money back. He hasn't said the same thing to the rest of NATO and EU. So we're getting, basically, they're spitting in our face while telling us, hey, you're going to have to help us if things get bad. But of course things are going to get bad. Why are things going to get bad? Because they're actively trying to make things bad. And if it wasn't bad enough that they've already been out there saying, hey, we're sending our troops to Ukraine. Now the newest member of NATO has stepped up, Sweden, and they're getting ready to send some top-of-the-line fighter jets to go patrol certain borders and perimeters. And man, this is just not going to end well. Let's go ahead and hop into this article. NATO's newest member is deploying a fighter jet that is designed specifically for a fight with Russia to protect alliance borders for the first time. For the first time in history. Sweden's armed forces said 6 of the country's JAS-39 Gripen fighter aircraft landed at an air base in Malbork, Poland on Wednesday to join an alliance airspace surveillance mission. NATO said this was the first time Sweden's combat aircraft had participated in the alliance's enhanced air policing mission from within another ally's airspace since it joined NATO in March 2024. It previously took part in NATO air policing missions only over its own territory as only a partner nation. Sweden, along with its neighbor Finland, broke with decades of neutrality to join NATO, citing Russia's invasion of Ukraine as its motivation for seeking membership. That was an unintended effect of Russian President Vladimir Putin's brutal war, a stated reason for which was to limit the expansion of the NATO alliance. Both Sweden and Finland built their militaries with a threat from Russia in mind, and the Gripen was one such project. The jets, made by the Swedish aerospace and defense company Saab AB, were specifically built to counter Russia. The commander of Sweden's Air Force at the time, Mats Helgesson, said in 2019 that the Gripen was designed to kill Sukhois, a type of Russian jet. Gripens can function from civilian roads rather than expensive runways at fixed airfields that can be targeted. Russia has targeted that kind of infrastructure during the war. It also requires less maintenance than some other aircraft, like the US-made F-16s that are widely available in a number of NATO arsenals. Michael Boner, a warfare analyst at the RAND Corporation, said that the Gripen's flexibility made it much better for a country that's bordering an aggressor, Poland, which borders Ukraine to the west, sees itself very much as a frontline NATO ally. Warfare experts, for these reasons, point to the Gripen as the best available fourth-gen fit of all NATO aircraft for Ukraine. Sweden has not pledged any, though it has explored the idea. And people ask, why did this conflict begin? Why did this war begin? Well, the article I just read you is a perfect example. It's a perfect example. This war started because Russia for years has been warning against NATO expansion. Now, why is Russia worried about NATO expansion? Well, look, Sweden, who just joined NATO recently, has already been weaponized to be used against Russia. Do you think that some of these bordering countries, do you think that America and the UK and the more powerful people in NATO, do you think they really care about these neighboring countries of Russia? Are the countries that are neighboring Russia? No. They don't care about them. They don't care about Ukraine either. But they want to weaponize these countries and use these countries in a potential fight against Russia. And I say potential, the fight is already here. So here we have Sweden. Sweden was just a neutral country a couple of years ago. It was a neutral country in the hostilities between Russia and NATO. Now here we are, a couple of short years later, and now top-of-the-line Swedish fighter jets, which some people say are some of the best fighter jets in the world, now these top-of-the-line Swedish fighter jets are flying on the border of Russia. And they're supposed to be used in the peacekeeping operations of Ukraine. Once the war ends, oh, Sweden, we got to fly over Ukraine, make sure Russia doesn't do anything in our top-of-the-line fighter jets. And this is why the war started. Because just like Ukraine, Russia is worried about these other neighboring countries being used as proxies, being used to fight Russia. And rightfully so. Russia has every right to feel that way because, look, it's happening. You know what I mean? And I'm not siding with Russia in the conflict, but Russia has openly stated, where they're coming from. And when you look at things like this, it's like, oh, okay, this is exactly what Russia was talking about. Oh, wait, Sweden, you joined NATO recently and now you're talking tough about fighting Russia? You're designing specifically fighter jets for war with Russia? You see how quickly things change? You go from a neutral country to now You are ramping up, your production of military equipment, and you're building top of the line fighter jets and stuff specifically for war with Russia. Russia is worried that Ukraine is going to become like that. And that's why Russia went into Ukraine. Or at least that's one of the reasons. So when you look at everything that's going on, I don't want to say Russia is justified in their invasion, but at least the excuses that they gave for their invasion, you can see like, oh, it's not that outlandish. It's not as outlandish as what people make it out to be. Because places like Finland and Sweden, they're already talking stupid. Okay? They just joined NATO. NATO doesn't even hardly take them seriously, but they're already talking stupid. We got the president of Finland like, yeah, we're going to go and send troops, and we're going to do this, and America needs to back us up. And then we got this nonsense going on. Oh boy, this is just not going to end well. I was hoping and praying, and I don't pray much, but I was hoping and praying that we would see an end to this conflict before things got worse. But it doesn't feel like they're going to allow this conflict to end. And not only are they not going to allow this conflict to end, instead of allowing this conflict to end, they're going to make the conflict worse to ensure that it doesn't end. And right now, they're basically writing a check that their ass can't cash. What's important for people to understand is that Russia has been in a wartime economy for years, which means they've been pumping up on making the military equipment, producing ammunition, making tanks, making submarines, making guns, making ships. They've been really pumping it out. Meanwhile, everyone else in NATO has been dialing back on their military spending. They've been dialing back on their military budget. They've been dialing back on producing weapons and ammunition. So NATO is not even in the position to fight right now. Most of these countries in NATO, they are not in the position to wage war right now at all. In fact, a lot of these countries' ammunition, a lot of the ammunition in these countries and their weapons have been depleted from sending it all to the Ukrainians. So the UK is out here talking tough about sending troops to Ukraine. The UK has maybe, 25 working tanks, folks. I kid you not. The UK has about 2 dozen working tanks in its arsenal. Russia has thousands. Russia has well over 1,000 battle-ready tanks right now that they can roll out on the battlefield right now. The UK, on a good day, has maybe 25. So there's so many levels to this conflict that a lot of people don't think about. So if you think that, these countries in Europe are just going to be able to roll over Russia, that's not happening. And it's never happened in history. I mean, no one just rolls over Russia. It just doesn't work out. And I'm not saying that as, I'm pro-Russia. I'm saying that as someone who has basic knowledge of history and other military conflicts in the past. But yeah, to be out here talking this big talk, knowing that you can't back that talk up, that's what's the most frustrating for people like me. And if you're someone who's watching from abroad, that's what's really frustrating for us Americans. Because, don't get me wrong, there are a lot of brave men and women in these various militaries throughout NATO. There's a lot of brave men and women in the British military. There's a lot of brave, men and women in France. I don't want to take anything from the individual soldiers, but the military overall in these areas, in these countries, they are not capable of fighting the war that they want with Russia. So the reason why it's so frustrating for people like me and for Americans is because we know that we're who y'all are depending on. When you talk about war with Russia, when you talk about doing this, when you talk about doing that, you're basically talking big, knowing that Big Brother America is behind you and going to back you up. That's what's happening here. And that's why it's so frustrating. Because none of these plans that they're talking about, none of that stuff works without the U.S. None of it at all. And they know that just as well as we know that. And maybe their population doesn't understand. I don't know how people over there think. But I just really think it's slimy and dirty and just, it's disgusting to think about other world leaders trying to drag America into this war, knowing that they can't fight this war or win this war on their own. They want us to win the war. You know what I mean? But I'm going to keep my eyes on the situation. There's a lot of moving parts, a lot of stuff going on right now. I'll keep you guys updated. Let me know your thoughts below. While you're down there, hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe, ring that notification bell. If you would like to support the channel, you could do so via Cash App, or you could drop a super thanks. But with that being said, I'll talk to you all soon in the next one.